the God Emperor of mankind, he who sits upon the golden throne, he who protects, beloved by all, and anathema to the gods of chaos. In a lot of ways, the Emperor is the most grimdark part and true face of the Warhammer 40K setting. He is the man that has led humanity for the better part of 50,000 years, worked from the shadows to build our societies and make the stars our own. He is the Emperor who stole fire from the gods and gifted humanity with power and prosperity unimaginable. He is the god who sits upon the Carrion throne, consuming 1,000 souls a day, guiding humanity through the worst timeline imaginable, the light in the galaxy filled with only war. But how powerful is the Emperor really? Was he really just the strongest human to have ever lived? Or is he something more? Like, how strong was he when he led his great crusade to reunite humanity across the stars? What about during the Horus heresy when he faced the Chaos Juice Horus Lupercal, championed and empowered by the 4 Chaos Gods themselves? And now that he supposedly has become an awakened god, it is said he has become a literal star of light, reviving not only the Primarch Rabute Gilliman, but even burning the Garden of Nurgle itself as a statement of his power. But not just only that, Dan Abnett, author for Black Library, called the Emperor a nuclear reactor of god energy. Like, what does that even mean? Because what if I told you, he's not just a god, the Emperor is implied to be the strongest god in all of 40k. We are gonna cover all that and a whole load more in this video, because in all honesty, how can one really understand the power of gods, unless we look at the one that once started as a humble man. Alright, let's get into the lore. Before we delve into answering just how powerful the Emperor is, we first have to ask ourselves, who, or even better what, is the Emperor? To start off with some of the basics, we know that the Emperor was roughly 50,000 years old by the time of the era Indomitus, which is around the 42nd millennium, with only Olanius' person stated as being older. The exact origins of the Emperor remain a mystery, but one of the more common beliefs in the community is that he is the product of a group of shamans sacrificing themselves to all reincarnate into a single body, so they could combine their powers to protect humanity from the forces of chaos. Of course, the Emperor himself claims he was born to mortal parents, and even lived through what one might call a bit of a biblical story, where the Emperor's mortal father was brutally murdered by his own brother, in an eerily similar style to Abel and Cain. Nice, GW. We learn of this from the Emperor himself, showing it in a vision to Ra and Dimion, arguably one of the Emperor's most trusted custodians, one of his direct protectors and companions, as seen in Master of Mankind. The custodian saw a vision of a long ago era, one where his emperor was but a boy clutching the skull of his murdered father. Ra watched as the emperor, without any emotion, walked to his father's murderer, and once he was there, he forced the man to die from a heart attack. The emperor's uncle died in that moment, the price he paid for killing his own brother. When the boy walked back to prepare the final funeral rites for his father, he turned to the golden giant that was Ra, who looked like a blazing god in the village of mud brick houses. "Hello, Ra," the boy said in a tongue that would not be spoken on this world for many thousand years. The language was called High Gothic by those who would come to speak it. The golden warrior Ra went to one knee, dazed at the sight of a Terra that hadn't existed for millennia. A clean and fertile place still untouched by war. This world wasn't really Terra at all, it was Earth. With the giant kneeling and the boy standing before him, it was far easier to meet each other's eyes. "My Emperor, you have never shown me this memory before," Ra said. The boy stared at him. "No, I have not. This is where it all began, Ra. Here, on the banks of the Sakarya River." The boy turned his old eyes to the river itself. So much water, so much life. If I had been disappointed by the galaxy's wonders, it is only because we were fortunate enough to grow in such a cradle. There was so much to learn, Ra, so much to know. It pleases me for you to see what it once was. Ra couldn't help but smile at the boy's distracted, contemplative tone. He had heard it many times before, in another man's voice as familiar as his own. "I'm honored to see it, sire." From his father's death and the first murder in human history, so yes, it is just the Cain and Abel story, the Emperor essentially killing Cain who killed his father Abel. The Emperor knew something had to change. Humanity needed to be guided and shaped, bound by laws and set to follow the course laid by its wisest minds. This is where the journey began for the boy, now still known as Neoth, who would one day be known as the Emperor, master of mankind, beloved by all. And from this point onwards, his dreams would be made manifest by the labor of many lifetimes. First, the Emperor nudged humanity in the right direction, creating grand designs and stopping them from exterminating themselves with rocks, fire, arrows, and nuclear wars. He even took up the roles of great diplomats or conquerors like Alexander the Great, or even chose humbler forms. Over the millennia, the Emperor would become known by many names and started employing the services of other just as gifted individuals. These perpetuals, as they were called, stood by him for many years. But as time passed on, each realized they could not keep up with the Emperor. One by one, these immortal humans left the Emperor. But with the Emperor possessing the ability to change his form and how people feel him, why exactly does he take the form of a golden warlord when he begins his great crusade? Well, the Emperor created the Primarchs, and he knew that for the Primarchs to respect him, he needed to be the ultimate warlord humanity had ever seen. To help with this, Malcador the Sigillite approached, one of the human companions that had been with him for over 5,000 years at this point, who came up with the idea of the Emperor, the golden facade, the one face every human warrior in the galaxy would follow into death and hell itself. Alright, with that dramatic introduction out of the way, let's look at how he grew stronger. What got him to this level? Essentially, what did this Dragon Ball Z training arc look like? The Emperor, of course, still had so much to learn before he could set about reuniting humanity under his banner. While he spent many hundreds of lifetimes as a warrior or general, perfecting the art of war, his powers as a psyker would also gift him many abilities. From biomancy, necromancy as noted in the era of rune anthology, all the way to foresight, there were very few skills the Emperor could not master. In his lifetime on Old Earth, there was not a single entity he could not destroy in battle, other than the Void Dragon, an ancient Necron Catan. While he was able to subdue this ancient power, the Emperor chose to lock it up on Mars, where it could no longer harm humanity, at least for the foreseeable future. But through this action, he also somehow laid the first steps towards creating the Mars colonies, and with that, the Martian Mechanicum. A coincidence? Probably not. The Emperor's foresight allowed him to prepare some of his grandest schemes, which would culminate in his Imperium of Man. From Terra, the Emperor would recruit his warriors, the Forges of Mars would be where they would be armed, the Selenar gene cults of Luna would take the Emperor's warriors and turn them into legions, cloning their gene seed by the millions. And finally, Saturn would arm his Imperium with some of the mightiest warships available at the time. Each of these cultures and cults came from the Emperor's millennia of planning. But even with his potent psychic gifts, the Emperor was far from powerful enough to become what he needed to be. So the Emperor journeyed to the world of Molech, which was similar to Terra except for its megafauna. While this world was colonized during the Dark Age of technology, the Emperor arrived with a group of perpetuals who still stood by his side. Once there, the Emperor found a literal gateway into the realm of chaos. What exactly transpired beyond this is unknown, but the Emperor left significantly more powerful and with the wisdom and knowledge to create the Primarchs. With the details unknown, the possibilities of what happened on Molech are endless, but the closest thing I can find to an answer can be found in the novel Vengeful Spirit, when the traitor Warmaster enters the same portal and has a very similar end result. Horus Lupercal had traveled to Molech with a giant force to take the world. He had traveled there once before with Fulgrim, Jagatai, the Lion and the Emperor, yet when they left, he took all memory of the place from them. Now Horus returned, and after brutal fighting, the only thing standing in his way was a handful of Ultramarines and the perpetual Olivia Sureka, who guarded the portal. They were swiftly destroyed, and with the help of a demon known as the Red Angel, Horus entered the portal. Those who watched Horus enter were blinded for a moment. Even Mortarion was not comfortable. Horus's Justaran bodyguards argued with the Pale King on whether they should follow or not, but ultimately they decided not to. Horus Lupercal fell through the oil-black surface of the gate and crashed to his knees before Abaddon and Kyber. Behind him, the darkness of the gate vanished with a bang of displaced air. Only a solid wall of mountain rock remained, as though the gate had never existed. Axamund rushed forward to help them as the War Master held himself upright on all fours, his back heaved with breath, like a man trapped in a vacuum suddenly returning to the atmosphere. Axamund and Abaddon were beside Horus in an instant, wanting to help him up. "You're still here. You waited for me, after all this time?" "Of course we waited. You've only been gone moments." "Moments? Then everything still has to be done." Horus stood at his full height, and Axamund's eyes widened at the sight of him. The War Master had aged. Catonia had shaped him, molded him into a warrior of flint-hard lines and cruel beauty. 2 centuries of wars had left no mark upon him, but the moments beyond the gate had done what the passage of time could not. Silver streaked the stubble upon his scalp, and the grooves at the corner of his eyes were deeper and more pronounced. The face Axamund had devoted his life to serving was now that of an ancient warrior who had fought for longer than he could have ever imagined, who had seen too much horror, and whose campaigning days had bled him dry. Yet the fire and purpose in his eyes were brighter than ever, nor was that fire simply confined to his eyes. What Axamund had taken to be cold flesh was the power of the Empyrean distilled and honed within the body of an immortal being. Horus stood taller, fuller, and more powerfully than ever. Lupercal had always found the War Master to be an awkward fit, a term never fully bedded in or taken as read. Now he owned the title, as though it had been his long before there was any such office to take. He was now, naturally, and without equivocation, the War Master. Yes, I found exactly what I was looking for. Now, as we see with Horus, he spent so much time in the realm of chaos that it actually aged him as well as empowered him. But as we all know, the Chaos Gods don't give their power without something in return. It is always and will always be a deal with the devil. But what might help us to fully paint a picture as to what happened to the Emperor and Horus in the realm of chaos, we can also take a look outside the grim darkness of the far future, and instead take a look at the Old World and Age of Sigmar. Some might argue 40K and AOS are not related, and while I'm not here to settle or debate this argument, I do want to draw a comparison so we can better understand the importance of Molag. To do this, we will specifically be taking a look at the Ever-Chosen Battle Tome and the following piece of lore. Little record exists of Archaon's history before the beginning of the Age of Myth, save tales of blood and conquest told by the Dark Priest and gibbering demons. It was a time of savagery beyond the mind of men to comprehend, and an age when the Ever-Chosen traveled between worlds seeking slaughter. For unrecorded eons, Archaon rose across the realms of chaos. Wherever he marched out from the impossible lands of that cursed dimension, no world was safe from his armies, and in the name of the Dark Gods, kingdoms and empires burned and bled. Each victory proved once more Archaon's mastery of war, and new trophies were heaped upon the idols of the ruinous powers. At his order, whole worlds burned, almost without counting where the grim legends forged in this time, and the realm of chaos still echoes the dark tales of the Ever-Chosen's crusade. As seen with Archaon, Horus, and the Emperor, they might have legitimately spent eons in the realm of chaos, fighting and destroying many civilizations, and growing even more powerful. Of course, this should be taken with a bit of salt, but this is my personal theory. There's also, of course, a stark difference between Horus and the Emperor himself. Horus came to Molag to learn of the Emperor's secrets and left, ascended with the powers of a growing god. The Emperor, meanwhile, came to unlock the secrets to create the Trademarks by stealing power from the Dark Gods, very much like Prometheus in Greek mythology, stealing fire to give it to mankind. Now that we have covered the Emperor until the Great Crusade, it is time to take a look at some of his achievements during his crusade. First, we will take a look at the time Karn witnessed the Emperor fight on Nova Shendak against a world of worms, as seen in After Deshea. These giant worms were intelligent, hateful, and used filament weapons of metal feathers. These worms turned planets into mud and used their sonic screams and witch whispers to travel through them. The worms even used humans to hunt and farm them. When the Great Crusade found them, they held 3 systems, and it was the Warhounds alongside the Iron Warriors of Perturabo to purge these Xenos. Karn told the story to Angron the first time they met, hoping he could convince his Primarch to join this Great Crusade. While under Perturabo, the Space Marines did the impossible, the battle was still brutal. Defenses were smashed, traps were sprung, Astartes and worms died. Angron pointed out that so far, Karn had only mentioned the enemy, Perturabo and the warriors of the Emperor, but not the Emperor himself. The Emperor, Karn said, and couldn't stop himself from smiling at the memory. The Emperor was a golden storm descending onto Nova Shandak's field. When the worms were amongst us, he came down from the peak, and it was as if he had brought a fragment of the sun down for us, in amends for the sun we couldn't see through those filthy fogs. He shone out over the battle like a beacon. His custodians were like living banners. The troopers rallied to them, but he... Karn closed his eyes, looking for the words. Imagine, sire, did they fight in your home with grenades, explosive weapons, small enough to hold in a hand and throw? High Rider weapons, snarled Angron, not fit for a warrior on the hot dust. But imagine, Primarch, some... He searched for the word Angron had used. Some paperskin who takes a grenade and simply grips it in his fist until it explodes. Imagine how it would destroy his hand, shatter the arm, ruin the body. Wherever the Emperor met one of their columns head on and shattered it like that, he didn't repel them, sire. He didn't defeat them. He ruined them. Assault after assault, not even Perturabo could match him in his fury. The story was not finished, but Karn had made his point. This is but a second-hand account of seeing the Emperor fight. But is he actually unbeatable? Or is there something more to it? As seen in the Wolf of Ashen Fire, as mighty as the Emperor is, he is not unbeatable. Such as when he fought the Mech Warlord, a massive orc warboss who is only dwarfed by the Beast of Ulanor himself, a supposed Krork. During this battle, the Lunawolves and Custodes fought giant orcs and a variety of the mechanical monsters, with even a dozen Custodes being laid low. He had no weapon, and where that wasn't normally a handicap to a warrior of the legions, against this foe it was a definite disadvantage. No weapon of his would hurt his beast anyway, but one of its own. Horus gripped one of the warlord's mechanized arms, one bearing the spinning brass spheres and crackling lines of lightning weapons. The armor strength was prodigious, but centimeter by centimeter, Horus forced it around. Lightning blasted from the weapon, burning Horus's hands black. Bone gleamed through the ruin of his flesh, but what was that pain when set against the loss of a father? With one last Herculean effort, Horus wrenched the arm up as a sawing blast of white-edged lightning erupted from the weapon. A searing burst of fire impacted on the warlord's mech forearm, and the limb exploded from the elbow down in a welter of blackened bone and boiling blood. The beast grunted in surprise, dropping the Emperor and staring in dumb fascination at the ruins of its arm. Seizing the chance he had been given, the Emperor bent low and surged upward with his blue steel sword extended. The tip ripped into the mech warlord's belly and burst from its back in a shower of sparks. "Now you die," said the Emperor, and ripped his blade up. It was an awful, agonizing mortal wound. Electrical fire vented from the hideous metal organs within the wreckage of the greenskin's body. It was a murderous wound that not even a beast of such unimaginable proportions could take and live. Yet, that was not the worst of it. Horus felt the buildup of colossal psychic energies and shielded his eyes as a furious light built within the Emperor. Power like nothing he had seen his father wield or even suspected he possessed. All-consuming, all-powerful, it was the power to extinguish life in every sphere of his existence. Physical flesh turned to ash before it, and what ancient fates had once called a soul was burned out of existence, never to cohere again. Nothing would ever remain of he who suffered such a fate. Their body and soul would pass from the finite energy of the universe to fade into memory and have all that they were wiped from the canvas of all existences. This was as complete a death as it was possible to suffer. That power blazed along the Emperor's sword, filling the greenskin with killing light. It erupted in a bellowing golden explosion, a lightning blaze from the coruscanting aftergrimage of its death, arcing from orc to orc as it sought out all those who were kin of the Master of Goro. Unimaginable energies poured from the Emperor, reaching throughout the entirety of the chamber and burning every last shred of alien flesh to a mist of drifting golden ash. Horus watched as the power of life and death coursed through the Emperor, saw him swell in stature until he was like a god, wreathed in pollutic amber flames, towering and majestic. Even as the world around him, made by the orcs of scrap, began to fall in on itself, the Emperor possessed enough psychic power to save not only himself, but also Horus and the forces that joined him in the spear tip. He essentially kamehameha'd the orc into the ether, and then just left with the boys under his arms while putting on sunglasses. By the way, give the story a read, it's really good and really quite fun. With so much power and skill as a warlord, the Emperor was as close to unstoppable as one could imagine. And the only reason the Horus heresy had a chance in the first place is because of Magnus the Red and his titanic psychic effort to send a message to his father on Terra. Yet, while ignorant of the fact, Magnus ultimately broke the psychic wards keeping a portal of the Webway guarded, which required the Emperor himself to keep close while enthroned on the Golden Throne. This would be the beginning of the war in the Webway, where the Legio Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and even the forces of the Mechanicum were required to push back an endless tide of demons. The fighting was so fierce that entire strike forces of the Emperor's talons disappeared in moments. Even a Side Titan was brought to its knees when it held a tunnel by itself. The war in the Webway was the most important battle of the Horus heresy, and the Imperium was losing. Some of the greatest heroes of the Imperium were laid low, and if you remember my How Powerful Are Custodes video, then you also know some Custodes fought with insane injuries and they were still losing. Only when the Emperor finally found a moment to get off the Golden Throne would he change the tide of his battle. Those who looked on saw something impossible in the sunless realm. The sun finally rose, as Sinan, master of mankind. His features were those of one born in the wildlands of ancient Eurasia. His skin was a Terran blend of bronze and burnt umber, his eyes darker still, his hair darkest of all. The long black fall of his hair was held by a simple circled crown of metal leaves, binding the mane back from his face so he could fight. More practical than regal. He moved as a man moved, combing through the straining ranks of his guardians on foot, pushing through the press of bodies on the rare instances they didn't instinctively move aside for him. He wore gold, as all of his guardians wore gold. The same sigils of Terran unity and imperial nobility that showed on their armor were cast thricefold upon his own. His armor joints didn't growl with the crude industrial snarl of mass-manufactured legionary plate, but purred with the song of older, purer technologies. On his back, held by a simple strap against his flowing red cloak, was an ornate bolter of black and bronze. In his hand, he carried a sword, one that looked nothing like the blade portrayed in the victory murals and illustrated sagas. By the standards of Terran lords and kings, it was inarguably beautiful. But in the grip of the ruler of an entire species, it was perhaps rather plain. A weapon to wield, a weapon for shedding blood, not an ornament to be admired. Impossibly complicated circuitry latticed its blade, black and coppery against a silver so hallowed that it was almost blue. In other wars on other worlds, he had greeted his custodians with subtle telepathy, speaking their names as he passed them before a battle. Here, he was more restrained, moving to the embattled front rank without offering any acknowledgement at all. Of the Neverborn, some broke ranks and fled. These cowardly shards of their vile masters knew that destruction had come. Some tore into each other, cannibalizing their kindred for strength in the face of destruction. Some lost what little grasp they had on corporeal reality, their forms melting and dissolving before the sword-wielding monarch even reached the front lines. The strongest raged at the sin of his existence. With a gestalt bellow loud enough to shake the windless air of this alternate reality, they fought to reach their arch-enemy. Ra was at the Emperor's side, spear whirling, lashing out to punch through the amorphous bodies of flailing blue creatures that wheeled through their many mouths. Sweat baked his face inside his helmet. The blood in his muscles was heavier than liquid lead. "Orders, sire." The Emperor raised his sword in a two-handed grip. As his knuckles tightened, the geography of circuitry ignited along the blade's length, spitting electrical fire and wreathing the sword length in flame. He didn't speak, he didn't look at any of his custodies. The sword came down. The webway caught fire. The Emperor's power was divided between stopping the webway from consuming Terra and enacting a bloody vengeance on the Neverborn. From the fires came 10,000 fallen warriors, the silhouettes of space marines, the betrayed dead of Istvan cleaving demons with fiery axes and swords. The 10th son of the Emperor was at their head, briefly reborn in his father's immolating wrath. The Emperor would not be wounded until Draconien, the End of Emperor spawned by the first murder that had also shaped the Emperor into the man he was today, wounded him. But this wound was a trap to ensnare the powerful demon, and sent it away with the equally wounded Ra Endymion as his gallower. By following the adventures of the Emperor, we see him go from a young boy to a warlord, and eventually into the master of mankind we know today. But as the Horus heresy progressed, the Emperor needed to become something even more powerful to face his traitor son. While more powerful than any Primarch, even the ones who became demonic like Angron or Fulgrim, the Emperor could no longer match Horus Ascended. Horus, who gained even more and more power as time passed on, paying with his sanity and soul, and who knows what else, to become the ultimate God King. So the Emperor began to do something similar, tapping into the raw force of the warp to become the Dark King. But even as the Dark King, the Emperor only tapped into the warp instead of feeding and using it like Horus did. But was this truly enough to beat Horus? The answer is sadly no. But if the Emperor would drink from the warp the same way Horus did, he would drink and drink until nothing remained of the boy who would be king. The master of mankind, beloved by all, would have given way to the Dark King. And what is the Dark King if not a dark prince of slaughter, change, ruin, and disease? To save humanity from the same doom that befell the Eldar, Olanius' person convinced the Emperor not to siphon off the warp and fight Horus with his own might, to face the giant as a mere man. So now we get to the part where Horus and the Emperor fight, where we see the Avatar of Chaos, empowered by all 4 Chaos gods at once, fight the Anatomy of Chaos itself. The Emperor tries his best, but in the end, he is not actually strong enough. Spoilers for those that haven't read The End in the Death Part 3. Please use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead if you wish to read this for yourself. This story plays out from Horus' perspective. You won't kill him. You are going to make him accept his fate. You will make him want the thing he does not want. The crown, the throne, submission to you and you alone. Death is too easy an escape, too merciful a release, after all he has done to you. He has been down so long, you could have killed him 6 or 7 times over with the maul. A single burst of bloodlight from the eye on your chestplate would have annihilated him, more roughly than he did with that fawning idiot of a Hetarion. But you won't. You circle him patiently. He's propped up on his arm, and his breathing has become so labored. He is almost panting. He's almost spent. He tries once more to rise. He fails. Don't you understand? You ask. I could have killed you the moment you got here. I fought you because I wanted you to live. He makes no answer, yet in the bloody tatters of his thoughts, you perceive the truth as he sees it. You didn't kill him right away because you didn't want to. Does he really believe that? Is he so deluded? You were trying to demonstrate your wisdom of authority, the qualities of grace, restraint, and compassion that will characterize your reign and prove you to be far finer, fairer monarch than he ever was. Power is nothing. Killing is a soldier's work, or the blunt answer of the inarticulate. Mercy and fairness are the instruments a worthy king wields. Still, his sputtering, fading thoughts insist the human part of you did not want to kill him, just as it does not want to do what the gods command. No one commands me, father. Not anymore. This is what this damned war's been about. He sighs. He thinks that if you believe that, then you have learned nothing. He bows his head. You go to him, crouch down, and make to lift him back up on the throne where he belongs. He looks up at you. His hand comes out from under him, swinging the crown you made. The tips of the bloodlight spikes step into your face and split open your skull. After this, the Emperor ends up getting beaten quite brutally. Yet in a moment of clarity of both Horus and Big E, Horus begs his father to end his nightmare as the 4 Chaos Gods slowly retreat back. The Emperor, as we know, blasts Horus' soul just like he did with that Orc war boss, and after this, collapses, getting carried back to the Golden Throne by Constantine and Rogol Dorn, to be interred and lead humanity from its confines for the next 10,000 years. Finally, we take a look at the Emperor as he is in modern 40k. In many ways, the Emperor has become even more powerful than the Dark King. If you didn't know, at the end of the heresy, as the Emperor gets interred onto the Golden Throne, they start feeding him 1000 Psyker souls a day. It is said that these empower him and are used to keep powering the Astronomicon at the same time, and over the course of 10,000 years, have been fueling his psychic might in the warp to better protect Terra, and with it the Imperium, from being swallowed by chaos and falling apart. With this constant drip of power that is siphoned right into his soul, which has grown into a star-like entity of light and personalities that all speak over each other and argue with each other as they try to portray their shared desires. That's a deep dive for another day. Simply put, the Emperor has gained a lot of new powers. We see him empower his living saints, raising them into essentially mini demon princes. They are capable of turning the tide of battle by just arriving, shining his golden light into the recesses of darkness, and burning demons with blazing beams of righteous fire that exert from their weapons and eyes. Even the demon Primarch Mortarion and Kugat Plaguefather fled when faced with the Emperor's wrath in the form of a living saint. Ultimately, the greatest display of power we see of the Emperor would be in Dark Imperium Goldblight, when he intervened on Guilliman's behalf. Nurgle could only watch as Mortarion's victory was taken from him. Even as he moved to strike down Guilliman, he froze. The battered and broken Primarch was not only healing, he was fully regenerating. Even his ruined armor was being mended. Guilliman's corpse rose up and hung in the air, supported by a pillar of radiance, and slowly turned so he was upright. He reached out, and the Emperor's sword appeared in his hand, and burned with the fire of 1,000 suns. He speaks to me, brother. Does he not speak to you? The unbearable radiance enfolded Guilliman, so glaring Mortarion threw up his hands. Father! Mortarion said, and his voice quailed like a little boy discovering the cause of some small but unforgivable crime. I am his right-hand brother. I am his general, his champion. I am the avenging son. By his might am I preserved. The landscape flickered between the blasted battlefield of Eax and the garden of Nurgle. The ground of the garden was rolling. Mortarion was sent back to Nurgle, who was more displeased with him every passing second. Hear me! Guilliman's voice boomed through eternities. The sword blazed higher, until the fire of it threatened to burn out time. I am Rabute Guilliman, last loyal son of the Emperor of Terra. It is not your destiny to end today, God of Plague, but know that I am coming for you, and I will find you, and you will burn. He gripped the sword of the Emperor two-handed and raised it high. Rising waves of fire ripped into the garden. From the great manse, a cry of rage sounded, as a wall of flame hotter than 1,000,000 suns devoured everything in its path, finally breaking and receding within yards of the black walls of Nurgle's house. Its infinite halls shook, mossy tiles fell from the roof, sodden timber steamed. This is a warning. The warp and the materium were once in balance. For too long you have tipped the scales. Understand that it is not only the warp that is capable of pushing back. This realm is not real. Only will is real, and none may outmatch my will. Be assured, Lord of Plagues, and convey this message to your brothers, that I do not speak for myself. I speak for the Emperor of mankind. So yes, the Emperor cannot just straight up revive someone now, but at the same time, he subdues Mortarion into a state of panic, burns Nurgle's garden itself, and then ends up letting Guilliman finish the job. Now, that is his current timeline. Of course, there are many moments, details and excerpts that I'd love to cover, but I think we have enough to take a look at the Emperor of Mankind's power scale. Now for the power skill level. For 40k, we used a definitely scientifically proven rating of 40 Warhammers. If a guardsman is 1 Warhammer, a space marine equals 10 Warhammers, and a Primarch is about 40 Warhammers, how many hammers can we give to the Emperor? As shown by the lore and excerpts we have covered today, the Emperor is, in his various forms and parts of his life, insanely powerful. But is he really the most powerful individual god in all of 40k? As we saw, there is no threat in the galaxy currently alive that could truly kill the Emperor. Sure, the Orc Mech Warlord came close, but with the Emperor there, often there are second meanings to things. Maybe he wanted Horus to prove himself by saving his life to strengthen their bond, or maybe to see if Horus was truly worthy of his role of War Master. Well, we have seen maybe the smallest god in all of 40k, Tauva, who ends up destroying an entire Nurgle fleet with terrifying ease. The Emperor sends greater demons screaming into the warp by just empowering his living saints. And when he essentially possessed Guilliman, the very Garden of Nurgle was damaged. An act that served as a warning to the grandfather of plagues, meaning that hypothetically, yes, the Emperor does seem capable of fighting the Chaos Gods one-on-one. Furthermore, according to Dan Abnett, the Emperor is not a true god but rather a god engine. Imagine a nuclear reactor but for godlike entities, fed by 1,000 souls a day that grow its soul. So if he were to be allowed to charge his powers for another 10,000 years, how would that look like? Would he be able to just obliterate another god? Or would he just implode on himself, kind of like a black hole of light and devotion? It should also be noted that while the Chaos Gods are in an ever-ending cycle of winning and losing in their great game, Nurgle is currently on the losing end, with Khorne and Tzeentch wrestling for true dominance. But as is always the case, it is only a matter of time for Khorne and Tzeentch to be subverted by Nurgle and Slaanesh once again. But the Emperor is not without his flaws. His intellect is vast, but so is his impatience, causing him to rush things. From losing most of the Perpetuals to speedrunning the Great Crusade, to even miffing off his own custodies for wanting to steal the fire of the Chaos Gods to get to his goals quicker. In many ways, the Emperor created his own doom. Even Malcador, his best friend, knew deep in his bones they had failed. As the war in the Webway ended, the Emperor, for the first time ever, did not know where to go next. Now, this is a bit of a step away from the norm of my How Strong is X series. But heck, it's do or don't time, so why don't we take a look at what stats the Emperor would have in the Horus Heresy tabletop. I should quickly add, I am no master at homebrewing rules, and these will be not perfect nor balanced. Just a bit of fun theorization to add something fun to round out this video before we get into power scaling. Now, while this might seem impossible, I would like you to keep in mind that the Horus Heresy does have rules for Horus Ascended. The version that walked out of the door on Moloch and had done the exact same thing the Emperor did. This guy is essentially a god at this point. For the Emperor's weapon skill and ballistic skill, he would have 10s in both stats. His movement would be 8 inches, his strength and toughness should come in at a staggering 10 for both, as well as him having about 8 wounds. Finally, his initiative would be 8, and he would have 8 attacks as well. These final 2 stats will be an easy guess, but his leadership is gonna be 10 and his armor save is gonna be like a 2+, let's be real. For his equipment, not only would his armor grant him a 3+ and vulnerable save, just like the rules for Dorn we have for the Primarch model in Horus Heresy 2.0, he could never be wounded on something better than a 4+. His weapons would be absolutely destructive. Strength user, AP1, instant death, specialist weapon, mastercrafted and deflegate for the sword. And for his power claw, I just say something like a power fist. Strength times 2, AP1, instant death, specialist weapon, mastercrafted and shred. His bolter will be 30 inches range, strength 6, AP2, assault 3, mastercrafted, shred and murderous strike 4+. Why did we go for this? Because, you know, he would probably just be hitting people through like eye lenses from a mile away. This guy does have 50,000 years of experience. The Emperor's special rules would be something along the lines of the same as the Primarch rule, the counterattack, deep strike, adamantium will, master of mankind, allowing him to use any psychic power in the game, similar to the Arch Sorcerer, and then of course, my favorite rule, beloved by all. The Emperor always succeeds leadership tests. Any Custodians and Primarch unit in your army also succeeds. Any friendly unit within 12 inches also automatically succeeds. And of course, who could have guessed, he is a loyalist. All at a nice round price of 1500 points. So he's about the Primarch choice for the Legio Custodes besides Valdor, and he's the same price as a Reaver Titan. I imagine, like, if you put these rules against the normal Horus Ascended, it ain't gonna be great. Let's just say that the Emperor didn't roll so well when Horus started smacking him. Maybe Horus just had, you know, weighted dice or something. And with that, I ranked the Emperor at 40 Warhammers out of 40. Yeah, the skill was built around him, and if you watched my earlier videos, you would have seen this coming. I think he might currently be the strongest singular god, but as we have seen over and over, when their plans align for a single moment, the Chaos Gods do come together to empower a single champion to slowly break down their one true enemy. But that is just my theory. Thank you guys for watching. This was a bit of a bigger one to research and get ready, as the lore of the Emperor is really quite split and scattered across a dozen sources. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are there any other crazy powers the Emperor possesses that should have been covered in this video? If you were to rank all gods in Warhammer 40K, where would you place the Emperor and why? Do you think he is the strongest god? Or is there another one that is even stronger? I got a bunch more videos coming up soon, a massive deep dive into the black ships that steal and ship psychers all across the Imperium to feed the Emperor and his golden throne. And then we will also have a good look at how to make a Custodes. And believe it or not, I'm like 35,000 words into a Dark Angel super deep dive script that hopefully will be done by the end of this month, but you'll have to subscribe to see that. Thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you think I deserved it with this video. Let me know your ideas, suggestions, questions and concerns down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, I have been Dutch, your lore master for today, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye. Also, just a quick last note, they really need to bring back the beloved by all, like naming of the Emperor, like, oh, the Emperor beloved by all. It's great. Bring that back, GW, please.